Hello, and welcome. Have you ever felt you were treading water in a sea of bills, convinced the islands of abundance were reserved for others? What if wealth isn't a distant prize, but your inescapable birthright, awaiting only your conscious claim? If you find this summary helpful, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to BookSnap, and comment below the title of the book you'd like us to summarize next. We'll make it happen soon. Damien folded his thin coat tighter against the winter chill as he stepped off the commuter train, suitcase in hand. Each morning, he made the same journey. 3 crowded cars, 2 transfer lines, and a final trudge through the city's early bustle to reach his cubicle as a junior clerk at the finance firm. He filed paperwork, reconciled ledgers, and answered calls with a practiced politeness that masked the steady ache in his chest. Here he was, 28 years old, consumed by numbers on screens, yet nowhere near the wealth he'd been taught to expect from hard work and smart choices. He'd grown up on stories of his grandfather's entrepreneurial triumphs, an immigrant who built a small appliance business into a regional powerhouse, passing on both fortune and a proud legacy. But the family fortune had dissipated in his father's miscalculations, and Damien felt the sting of that loss every time he balanced the books. Each check he wrote, rent, tuition loan, groceries, felt like an invisible toll on his own future, as if prosperity had become a closed door he couldn't even knock on. One gray afternoon, during a shaky commute, Damien's eyes fell on a battered paperback poking out of a turnstile rack. Your Right to be Rich by Napoleon Hill. He had read Hill's more famous works, but never this one. With a mix of curiosity and skepticism, he purchased it for the price of a single subway token and cracked it open on the platform, the train's squeal underscoring his doubt. The opening chapter delivered a seismic jolt. Every man and woman upon this earth has a divinely appointed right to the abundance of all good. Damien reread the line, pulse quickening. This was no mere promise of riches for the lucky few, but a declaration of entitlement written in cosmic ink. Wealth, Hill argued, was woven into the very fabric of life, an inheritance of mind and spirit accessible through conscious awareness and deliberate action. That night, back in his narrow apartment, Damien placed the book on his dining table and closed the blinds against the city glow. He sat before the text, heart thundering, as Hill wrote, "To deny one's right to be rich is to deny the universal law that supplies riches to every soul." Damien felt a tremor of recognition. He had been denying himself his own birthright, shackled by stories of limitation and loss. In that moment, he vowed to reclaim the inheritance waiting within his own consciousness. The next morning, Damien crafted a simple ritual. Before donning his coat, he would stand before the bathroom mirror and declare, "I have the right to be rich, and I am worthy of every good that comes to me." At first, his reflection stared back with disbelief. His own lips moved the words, but his mind balked at their truth. Undeterred, he repeated the affirmation 10 times, feeling the words vibrate in his chest like a faint drumbeat. On the train, when stressed commuters pushed past him, he closed his eyes and repeated, "This right is universal, and it guides my every action." The phrase shifted his posture. He felt less like a passive passenger and more like a magnet set to draw opportunity. His commute no longer felt like wasted time, but a corridor through which his own emerging consciousness could flow. At work, Damien approached his ledger with a new mindset. Where he once saw columns of strict numbers, he now perceived patterns of potential, each entry a node in the network of abundance that could converge in his own life. He volunteered to help a seasoned analyst on a complex forecasting model, absorbing new skills and demonstrating initiative. Rather than seeing his junior salary as a ceiling, he reframed it as the foothold from which to climb toward his rightful wealth. Outside the office, Damien began to seize small opportunities he once overlooked. He offered to tutor undergrads in finance theory, charging a modest fee that padded his savings. He joined an evening investment club, where he listened and learned from peers who treated money not as a taboo topic, but as a tool for growth. Every step he took, no matter how modest, He accompanied with the affirmation of his right to abundance, reinforcing the message with action. Within weeks, the changes rippled outward. His modest tutoring side hustle grew in demand, providing not just extra income, but the confidence to negotiate a raise at his day job. His contributions to the forecasting model earned him recognition and a spot on a high-profile project team. And each time he navigated these opportunities, he whispered to himself in the mirror, "I have the right to be rich," reminding himself that every forward step was a reclamation of that birthright. Hill emphasizes that recognizing our right to wealth requires both belief and ethical action, that abundance is not hoarded but shared in service. Damien felt this truth as he tutored students on scholarship, guiding them toward their own financial empowerment. He invested in a local cooperative business, ensuring that his gains also uplifted others. In doing so, he lived the principle that wealth, when shared, multiplies in both material and spiritual dimensions. Months later, under the same flicker of city lights, Damien stood before his bathroom mirror and observed not the doubtful clerk he had been, but a man transformed, eyes bright, shoulders squared, heart attuned to a universal promise. He declared one final affirmation: "My right to be rich is inseparable from my right to live a life of purpose, service, and joy." In that moment, he felt the walls of limitation dissolve, replaced by the horizon of infinite possibility. As he stepped out into the night, pockets a little heavier and mind a lot lighter, Damien knew the journey was just beginning. But he also knew this: the richest treasures are forged when we awaken to our divine entitlement, align our thoughts with our purpose, and act with integrity to claim the abundance that has always been ours. The late summer sun shone through the skylights of Miriam's small workshop, illuminating shafts of dust dancing above her work table. For months, she'd poured her heart into crafting artisanal wooden toys, hand-carved trains, whimsical puzzles, believing that a tidy profit awaited if she simply honed her craft. Yet each evening, after the last scrap of wood was swept away, her ledgers told a different story. Sales trickled in sporadically, and expenses ate up any gains. Miriam felt caught between passion and survival, convinced that the marketplace's mechanics were the only forces dictating her fate. One morning, over a cup of chamomile tea, Miriam opened Your Right to be Rich to a chapter titled The Divine Plan of Finance. Here, Hill revealed that money wasn't a random trickle but part of a higher order, a universal currency that flows toward purpose aligned with service and integrity. He wrote, "Wealth is a measure of service rendered, and those who align their work with the divine plan attract prosperity naturally." Miriam paused, tea steaming in her hands. She had viewed her wooden toys as charming diversions, not as vessels for greater purpose. That afternoon, she stepped into her workshop with fresh resolve. Instead of carving another train, she set aside her tools and sat amidst her creations, envisioning the children who would play with them. A toddler's first proud grin as wheels clicked on track, a shy youngster finding courage in building towers. Miriam realized her toys weren't mere wood. They were instruments of joy, learning, and imagination. They held the potential to spark wonder in young hearts and to foster parent-child connections around shared play. Guided by this insight, Miriam redesigned her business model. She crafted storytelling workshops at local libraries where she read tales and gifted each child a simple wooden puzzle to solve. She collaborated with pediatric therapists to design tactile toys aiding developmental milestones. She partnered with a children's hospital to provide handmade toys for recovery rooms, infusing her work with healing intention. As her offerings aligned with a higher purpose, fostering learning, healing, and connection, Miriam noticed a shift in the flow of funds. Orders from schools, preschools, and therapy centers arrived steadily, drawn not just by craftsmanship, but by the resonance of her mission. She realized that when her enterprise served a divine plan, lift young minds, aid growth, and bring comfort, prosperity followed as a natural current rather than a forced pursuit. Hill emphasized that money is merely the applause of the marketplace. a recognition of genuine service. Miriam experienced this as she delivered a batch of brightly painted stacking blocks to a developmental center. The director, moved by the thoughtfulness and quality of the toys, placed a standing order for new designs each month and referred Miriam to a network of educational institutions. The applause manifested not in fleeting praise, but in contracts that transformed sporadic sales into reliable income. Emboldened by this divine alignment, Miriam introduced a purpose premium to her pricing, an option for customers to support her library workshops and hospital donations. Many happily added the premium, viewing it as a way to extend her service. This small increase bolstered her margins and deepened customer engagement. Parents knew their purchase fueled both play and purpose. Miriam's transformation didn't just enrich her business, it redefined her relationship with wealth. She no longer saw profits as mere numbers but as tangible echoes of the joy and growth her work instilled. Each payment became a note in a harmonious symphony between creator, customer, and community need. The divine plan, once an abstract philosophy, had become the animating force behind every wooden puzzle and painted train. Months later, as autumn leaves drifted past her workshop windows, Miriam sat at her table surrounded by prototypes for a new line, musical toys designed to support early auditory development, created in collaboration with local music therapists. She reflected on Hill's words. Align your work with the universal purpose, and abundance will serve as your faithful companion. She realized that when she had shifted her aim from profit to purpose, wealth had followed as a natural byproduct of meaningful service. That evening, as she packed her supplies for a hospital donation, Miriam felt a deep, luminous satisfaction. In aligning her creativity with a higher financial blueprint, she had unlocked the divine plan of finance, transforming wooden scraps into instruments of wonder, healing, and, yes, prosperity. In the echo of children's laughter that would soon fill hospital halls and library corners, she heard the true wealth that comes when we serve beyond ourselves and trust in the abundance woven into the fabric of life. A hush fell over the conference room as Samuel, a first-time investor, cleared his throat. Arrayed before him were 3 seasoned colleagues, financial analysts whose combined experience dwarfed his own. His palms sweated as he pressed play on the presentation. A sleek new model predicting quarterly returns for a startup focused on eco-friendly packaging. The projections sparkled with promise, but his own uncertainty cast a shadow over the numbers. Later that evening, his smartphone screen glowed with a reminder, Mastermind Conference Call, 7 a.m. Samuel swiped through notes from Your Right to Be Rich, pausing on Hill's admonition. The mastermind principle taps the collective genius of aligned minds, creating a force greater than the sum of its parts. Hill described how pooling wisdom, energy, and intent could birth strategies and wealth far beyond isolated effort. Samuel realized he had tried to pilot his investment alone, unaware of the multiplier waiting in genuine collaboration. The next week, Samuel convened a small mastermind circle, inviting his 3 trusted colleagues and a mentor from the firm's executive board. They gathered around Samuel's polished table, each contributing unique expertise: market analysis, regulatory insight, consumer trends, and financial structuring. Samuel shared his eco-packaging model, then stepped back, inviting open critique and ideas. As discussion unfolded, the circle's energy crackled. The analyst proposed partnering with major retailers for pilot runs. The regulator honed messaging to secure green certifications. The consumer expert mapped social campaigns to drive viral awareness. The mentor suggested a phased funding approach mitigating risk. In that crucible, new strategies emerged, far richer than Samuel's solo projections. The synergy was palpable. The invisible third mind Hill had promised now pulsed with creative force. Samuel refined his model, integrating the circle's insights into a robust, multi-stakeholder partnership plan. When he presented the revised proposal to the investment committee, the response was unanimous approval, an outcome he doubted he could have achieved alone. In that moment, he felt wealth's true formula: collaborative brilliance, organized with unwavering purpose. From then on, Samuel's mastermind circle became a monthly ritual. He and his peers rotated topics, new ventures, portfolio challenges, personal development, and supported one another's growth beyond pure finances. Investments flourished, but so did friendships and mutual trust. Each member found that as they lifted others, their own ventures soared, demonstrating Hill's law. A mind harmonized with kindred spirits becomes a conduit for inexhaustible abundance. Nina stood at the grand oak doors of the community center, the weight of her nonprofit's mission heavy on her shoulders. 5 years ago, she had founded Seeds of Hope with a simple vision: to transform vacant urban lots into community gardens that would nourish both bodies and spirits. Yet funding had ebbed and flowed unpredictably. Volunteers drifted away, and each season's harvest felt as fleeting as summer's bloom. Nina feared that her heartfelt purpose would wither before it bore lasting fruit. One evening, exhausted by grant applications and donor rejections, Nina curled up on her couch with Napoleon Hill's Your Right to Be Rich. Turning to the chapter on aligning purpose with prosperity, she read, "True wealth is not found in money alone, but in the harmony between one's mission and the means to fulfill it." Hill described prosperity as the natural companion to service when we weave financial strategy into our deepest calling. Nina felt a revelation. She had pursued funds as a means to sustain her purpose, but she had not yet aligned her revenue model to the very service at the garden's core. The next morning, amidst dew-laced tomato vines, Nina sketched a new blueprint. Rather than rely solely on external grants, she would design garden programs that generated their own income, transforming beneficiaries into participants and turning produce into profit that circled back into the community. She envisioned a harvest cooperative. Members would cultivate plots, learn sustainable farming, and share in the garden's yield, selling surplus at local farmers' markets. The co-op's revenues would cover seeds, tools, and educational workshops, creating a self-sustaining ecosystem of purpose and prosperity. With this vision, Nina convened her core volunteers under the shade of a blossoming apple tree. She shared the cooperative concept, inviting gardeners to become stewards not just of soil, but of the nonprofit's future. Skepticism hovered. Some feared the co-op would undermine free community access. Nina listened, then offered a balanced model. A small percentage of plots reserved for educational outreach and free donation programs, while the majority operated under a sliding-scale membership fee tied to produce share. In this way, service and commerce would intertwine rather than compete. They piloted the co-op with 10 enthusiastic members. Each received hands-on training in composting, crop rotation, and seed saving, instilling both skill and ownership. When the first batch of heirloom tomatoes ripened, the group set up a stand at Saturday's market. Passers-by paused at the vibrant produce and the beaming gardeners who recalled their journey from seed to sale. The stall's modest earnings covered next season's heirloom seed order, proof that prosperity could bloom from purposeful labor. Emboldened by this early success, Nina extended the model. She established garden-to-table dinners, where members and paying guests alike shared meals prepared with freshly harvested vegetables. Local chefs volunteered their talents in exchange for publicity and a share of proceeds. These dinners became a monthly highlight, drawing crowds eager not only for delicious food, but for the story behind each ingredient. A story of empowerment and shared purpose. To broaden impact and revenue, Nina launched a Green Workshops series, teaching sustainable gardening, beekeeping, and natural dyeing techniques. Participants paid tiered fees, and proceeds funded free workshops for underserved schools. Hill's insight rang true. When service generates value worth paying for, prosperity becomes the engine that fuels deeper purpose rather than a diversion from it. Within a year, Seeds of Hope's financial picture transformed. Membership fees, dinner proceeds, and workshop revenues created a steady income stream that underwrote 80% of the nonprofit's operating costs. Grant writing became a smaller piece of the puzzle, used strategically for capital improvements like upgrading greenhouse infrastructure and funding traveling scholarships for community youth. Nina watched as grant managers greeted her proposals with enthusiastic curiosity about the co-op's innovative model, rather than viewing her as a perpetual supplicant. More profoundly, Nina witnessed a shift in the community's relationship to the garden. Members took pride in steering both planting and financial decisions. Volunteers became co-owners of the nonprofit's destiny. The alignment of purpose and prosperity had ignited a deeper sense of embodiment. Each tomato harvested, each dinner served, each workshop taught wove a thread between heart and harvest, mission and margin. As spring unfolded, Nina looked over her thriving garden at dawn, mist swirling around the raised beds. She reflected on Hill's words, "When your work serves a higher end, wealth naturally gravitates to you, eager to support the cause." Seeds of Hope had become more than a garden. It was a living testament to the alchemy of service and strategy, where the soil of purpose yielded a harvest of both bounty and sustainability. That morning, as gardeners gathered to plant a new row of lavender for essential oil workshops, Nina felt a profound gratitude. By aligning her nonprofit's mission with a prosperity model rooted in community engagement and co-creation, she had ensured that the right to be rich extended not just to her balance sheet, but to every hand that tilled the earth and every heart it touched. As twilight settled over the city's skyline, Amina flipped on the soft lamp beside her crowded desk, the glow revealing stacks of legal textbooks and patent manuals. As a mid-career patent examiner, she had spent years poring over technical blueprints and legal precedents, an uncelebrated guardian of intellectual property. Though she earned a stable salary, her bank balance never seemed to reflect the depth of her expertise. She longed to convert her specialized knowledge into a richer form of prosperity. One evening, while researching a complex biotech patent, Amina stumbled upon Your Right to be Rich in the agency library. She paused at Napoleon Hill's passage on the alchemy of specialized knowledge, where he explained, "General knowledge, no matter how vast, will not bring riches. Only organized, applied knowledge, specialized and directed, becomes the seed of true wealth." The idea struck her. Her mastery of patent law and technical terminology was her hidden treasure, yet she treated it as a mere job function, not a source of multiplied value. Inspired by Hill's counsel, Amina sketched a plan. She would transform her deep patent examination skills into a consulting practice, guiding inventors and startups through the labyrinth of intellectual property. Rather than confining her knowledge behind government walls, she would package it into structured offerings, workshops, one-on-one coaching sessions, and digital courses focused on patent strategy. That weekend, Amina drafted her first Patent Fundamentals workshop, outlining modules on patentability criteria, avoiding common rejection pitfalls, and drafting claims. She booked the Community Tech Incubator's conference room, invited 10 early-stage entrepreneurs she'd met at local meetups, and offered the workshop at a modest fee, both to test demand and to validate her value. Nervous but determined, she launched the session. On the morning of the workshop, Amina felt her pulse quicken as participants arrived with laptops and prototype sketches. She guided them through interactive exercises, identifying inventive concepts, crafting preliminary claims, and predicting examiner objections. Their eager questions about chemical formulas, mechanical designs, and software algorithms ignited lively discussions that transcended textbook theory. By noon, attendees left with clear action plans and a newfound confidence that their innovations could be protected. Amina's specialized knowledge had leapt beyond the examiner's bench, transforming into a catalyst for others' success, and in turn into a nascent revenue stream. Word spread, startups on Bay Street invited her to train their teams. Local universities asked her to guest lecture. A legal technology firm commissioned her to develop online micro-courses. She also published a concise ebook, Patent Strategy for Innovators, generating passive income from digital sales. But Hill emphasized that specialized knowledge alone isn't enough. It must be organized and marketed. To reach a broader audience, Amina built a simple website spotlighting her consulting packages, testimonials, and downloadable resources. She launched a monthly newsletter, The Patent Insider, sharing tips on recent case law and examination trends. Each issue positioned her expertise as a vital bridge between invention and protection. Over months, Amina's side enterprise blossomed. Her consistent workshops and growing ebook revenues matched, then surpassed, her examiner salary. More importantly, she derived a profound satisfaction from empowering inventors, knowing her hard-earned knowledge no longer slumbered behind bureaucracy, but served as a beacon guiding creativity toward tangible success. Reflecting on her journey, Amina understood Napoleon Hill's teaching. Specialized knowledge, when aligned with the right market and delivered with clarity, becomes a perpetually compounding asset. She had converted years of technical mastery into streams of income and impact, an alchemy of intellect and initiative that honored her right to be rich. That evening, as Amina updated her workshop curriculum on emerging biotech patents, she felt the gentle thrill of purpose and prosperity intertwined. In the soft hum of her home office, she whispered her own affirmation. "My specialized knowledge is a treasure that enriches me and those I serve." And in that moment, beneath the quiet glow of her lamp, she realized that true wealth flows when we package our deepest expertise for the world to receive. Each month, David's bank balance seemed caught in a slow, painful drift, paychecks arriving just in time to cover bills, with little left over for savings. As a single parent raising two energetic twins, he juggled rent, groceries, school fees, and car repairs, feeling that any disciplined savings plan was a luxury he couldn't afford. Yet beneath his frustration pulsed a persistent anxiety. What if an emergency derails us? Late one evening, after tucking his children into bed, David leafed through Your Right to Be Rich and paused at Napoleon Hill's chapter on the habit of saving. Hill wrote, "Accumulating money begins with the simple, deliberate act of saving a portion of what you earn, training the mind to value security and prepare for opportunity." The wisdom struck him. Saving wasn't reserved for the wealthy. It was the bedrock habit that creates stability and opens doors, no matter one's income. Determined to transform his financial trajectory, David crafted the "pay yourself first" rule. Before any bills were paid or expenses incurred, he would set aside 10% of each paycheck directly into a separate savings account. He automated the transfer the moment his funds cleared, removing the temptation to spend it. Though small, just a few dollars at first, the act signaled to his mind that savings were not optional, but an integral expression of his right to security and abundance. The first month, David watched the savings account inch upward by just $50. It felt insignificant compared to his $3,000 monthly expenses, yet he celebrated that deposit as a personal victory. Each subsequent payday, the habit solidified. $75 one month, then $100, as occasional freelance gigs allowed him to raise the percentage during lean weeks. To reinforce the habit, David launched a savings reflection ritual every Sunday evening. He'd log into his accounts, note the cumulative balance, and journal briefly on how that safety net made him feel. Calmer, more prepared, more confident in seizing opportunities. By tracking both numbers and emotions, he built a positive association that strengthened his commitment. Within 6 months, David's savings had grown to nearly $1,000. Enough to cushion a minor emergency. When his car's alternator failed, instead of charging the repair on a high-interest credit card, he covered the cost directly, sparing himself debt and stress. The relief was profound. He experienced for the first time the empowering freedom that Hill described as the peace of mind that shelters the diligent saver. Encouraged, David introduced his twins to the habit of saving. He gifted each child a clear, labeled jar, one for spending, one for sharing, and one for saving. Every time they received allowance or birthday money, they divided it among the jars. Watching their coins stack encouraged them to grasp the value of foresight and generosity. Family saving sessions became joyous rituals, reinforcing the culture of preparedness across generations. As David's financial cushion grew, so did his confidence to pursue new ventures. He enrolled in a weekend course on digital marketing, long overdue but previously deemed too risky. The course fee came comfortably from his savings, and within months, he began securing contracts helping local businesses sharpen their online presence. Those additional revenues fueled more growth, allowing him to increase his savings rate to 15% of all income. Hill reminds us that saving is not simply for emergencies, but also for opportunity, the chance to invest, learn, and expand. David embodied this truth as he channeled saved funds into his own professional development, multiplying both his skills and his means. Each dollar set aside became a seed planted in fertile soil, sprouting opportunities he once believed were beyond his reach. By the end of the year, David's savings account held more than 3 months' living expenses, a transformation from near zero to robust stability. He felt his mindset shift. Scarcity's tight grip loosened, replaced by the calm assurance of abundance. In practice, he discovered that the habit of saving is a foundational act of self-respect and empowerment, affirming his right to be rich in security, choice, and peace of mind. One crisp morning, as he prepared breakfast for his children, David paused at the small pile of jars on the counter. He smiled at the clinking coins, testaments to a habit that had fortified his family's future. Whispering a silent thanks to Hill's timeless wisdom, he realized that every act of saving, no matter how modest, was a declaration of his birthright, the right to be rich in both means and mindset. In the golden glow of her studio, Elena ran her fingers over the broad expanse of canvas before her, an abstract swirl of golds, blues, and violets meant to capture light itself. As an independent artist, she'd long grappled with financial uncertainty, signing over pieces at discount prices just to keep the lights on. Though critics praised her work, her bank account told a different story. Sporadic sales, lingering unpaid invoices, and the constant ache of undervaluation. One evening, after closing a small gallery show, Elena wandered into a quiet bookstore and discovered Your Right to Be Rich tucked among business tomes. A single phrase leapt from its pages. Wealth is a vibrational frequency. Align your thoughts and emotions with abundance, and prosperity will resonate in your life. The idea of money as energy, not just currency, resonated deeply. What if her own creative vibration could magnetize the wealth she sought? That night, Elena lit a candle by her easel, closed her eyes, and tuned into her inner world. She noted the familiar tension. Worries about bills, fear of rejection, the harsh critic's inner voice. With each exhale, she released those low vibrations. On the next inhale, she summoned feelings of gratitude. Gratitude for her gift, for the brushes at her fingertips, for every hand that had ever paused before her art. She repeated silently, I am a channel of abundance. My art radiates wealth. Emboldened, Elena wove vibrational alignment into her daily routine. Each morning before painting, she played a brief prosperity invocation, a curated playlist of uplifting music paired with affirmations. I create value that flows effortlessly into my life. Abundance is my natural state. As colors emerged on her canvases, she consciously infused each stroke with the warmth of gratitude and the luminosity of prosperity. When approaching potential buyers or galleries, Elena noticed a shift. Instead of rushing pitches, she radiated calm confidence. She led with stories of each piece's creation, moments of epiphany in deep night, the dance of pigments in sunlight, and offered pricing that reflected not only her time, but the value of the experience her art delivered. Buyers, sensing her authenticity, met her rates with enthusiasm, eager to become part of her vibrational symphony. Elena also created abundance showcases on her website, virtual exhibitions titled Not by Technique but by Feeling, Radiance, Serenity, Transformation. Each page paired images of her paintings with short meditations encouraging visitors to feel the frequency of abundance. Traffic rose. Patrons lingered, moved by the harmonious blend of visuals and emotion. Sales followed as these viewers became eager participants in her creative current. Hill teaches that wealth arises when our inner state matches the frequency of abundance. Elena experienced this when, after weeks of aligned practice, she received an unsolicited commission from an international fashion house seeking bespoke fabric designs. The project's fee alone equaled her previous year's earnings, an unmistakable sign that when she broadcast abundance, abundance answered in kind. In the months that followed, Elena's vibrational alignment practice permeated every aspect of her life. She negotiated a long-term studio lease at favorable terms, collaborated with local charities to donate art for fundraisers, and led free community workshops on creativity and prosperity. Each of these endeavors flowed seamlessly from her inner frequency, drawing opportunities that resonated with her core values. On a brisk spring morning, Elena stood before her largest canvas yet, a grand triptych named Eternal Bloom. She wrote in the corner, almost as an inscription, "Wealth is the echo of my abundant heart." As she signed her name, she felt a deep yet gentle surge of fulfillment. In that moment, she understood Napoleon Hill's final promise. When we live as conduits of abundance, through thought, emotion, and action, wealth becomes not merely a goal, but an inevitable harmony in the grand composition of life. Composition of life. Composition of life. Composition of life. Composition of